Wayne, for joining us today on the We Need to Act podcast. It is a great pleasure to have you.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And I would like to start by asking you about sustainability education. Well, this podcast was created for that purpose, and as we know, it encompasses a broad of multifaceted set of concepts. As a pracademic, someone who bridges both academic theory and practical application, what concept or idea do you find is most commonly misunderstood or misrepresented in the field?
I think all of them are misunderstood. I have spanned many of the evolutions from business ethics through corporate social responsibility or CSR, then sustainability, creating shared value, now ESG, and now we're in the age of regeneration and thriving. I think they all get misunderstood and practiced in ways perhaps that it wasn't intended that they should be. So it's an ongoing challenge. If you ask me which are still the most popular, I would say sustainability is still the prevailing conceptualization. CSR, corporate social responsibility, is a little bit out of vogue for the last decade or so, and I say that as someone who started CSR International. But I think partly because that concept was never really embraced in the way that it could have been as a holistic concept. It could never get away from its roots in philanthropy and charity, despite there being an international standard like ISO 26000, which was quite holistic. Um, so sustainability prevails. Now we see ESG kind of taking some of that space, some companies favoring that positioning. But then we also see an ESG backlash happening both in Europe and the United States. So I think it's still all to play for. Most important thing is whether the underlying ideas and practices are getting through. It's more important than the concept or the label.
Thank you for your answer. There is an ongoing conversation regarding whether we should replace the concept of sustainability with regeneration. And actually, you present a different concept in your last book, Thriving. But in the face of today's polycrisis and the persistence of wicked problems, those problems that don't have an apparent solution, do you think, do you still believe we can transform global challenges into opportunities to thrive?
Yeah, let me answer both of your questions at the same time because there is the idea of regeneration or regenerative business, and I simply call it thriving. It's essentially the same thing, um, and it is an important shift. It doesn't throw away sustainability or even corporate social responsibility. All of these concepts build on each other, but it is a necessary shift because what we're saying is that the problems still persist after more than 35 years since we coined sustainable development by the United Nations, um, and that we need to be actually more ambitious. It may sound counterintuitive if we're not even meeting this sort of net zero ambition of sustainability, which is what it means to sustain, um, to do no harm. Essentially, we're not meeting that, but it matters what you strive for because if you aim at net zero, you'll probably fall short of net zero. Whereas if you aim at net positive, at least you've got a better chance. And you mentioned the key word, which is innovation. I think what we've found in the last couple of decades is you can't solve these problems incrementally, which is what we've tried to do. We've tried to take a management systems approach like we did for quality management and applied it to social and environmental management. It's resulted in improvements, but it hasn't kept pace with the problems. So you can't do it incrementally. You can't also only do it rationally. because we found that you can have all the facts and all the science and still people don't change as much as they need to. You have to do it creatively, and you have to bring in science, technology, and innovation in order to actually create a different order of solutions that will take us, out of the crises that we face. And that's the basic idea behind thriving. It's how do you go from breakdowns in our social, environmental, and economic systems to breakthroughs? And what we know is that if we look at complex living systems, they naturally tend towards thriving. They tend towards operating healthily and promoting life. And what we've done is interfered with those. And so now we need to redesign just to be consistent with actually the way that life is designed.
You describe a system that regenerates itself,
Exactly.
a symbiotic relationship often lacking among humans, I think. In your view, is it possible for endless economic growth to be compatible with sustainability or thriving?
Well, of course, when you put it like that, the logical answer must be no, because nothing grows endlessly, quantitatively at least, or physically. We're on a limited planet with finite resources. I think it was Kenneth Boulding, an economist from the 1960s, who said anyone who believes in infinite growth is either a madman or an economist. And that is how economists have viewed the world: is that we can simply grow and grow and grow, and that's the aspiration of businesses, that's the aspiration of politicians for their economies. And it has worked for, you know you could say, thousands of years, at least since the Industrial Revolution. It has worked to an extent because we haven't yet hit those limits, the planetary boundaries. But now we see that we're actually crossing those boundaries and getting into the danger zone of those ecosystems uh, breaking down, collapsing, and then, of course, becomes uneconomic, and society collapses as well. So, but there is a nuanced answer to this as well, because we have to ask what kind of growth. Um, do we want renewable energy to grow? Do we want clean technologies, electric vehicles to grow? Do we want biomaterials and more sustainable forms of food, like, cell cultured meat, or precision fermented ingredients, or regenerative agriculture to grow? And the answer is yes. We need the solutions to grow at the same time as we need the problems, the old former technologies and practices, to degrow, to essentially disappear. And so, I'm not a believer in no growth, or even degrowth, for two main reasons. One is that um, it's psychologically and practically very difficult to sell. I mean, you just won't get a CEO or a politician saying, follow me, we're aiming for degrowing our company or our economy. We all have that sense that something needs to be growing to be improving. Um, but the second reason, as I said, is that we need solutions to grow, more sustainable solutions. And for those two things to be true, and for us not to collapse, we need to firstly embrace a fully circular economy. So, all waste needs to become input back into the process, either into nature or back into production. And secondly, we actually need regeneration, which is we need to be restoring, ecosystems, revitalizing societies, bringing back economies.
Great point, thank you. I was recalling a conversation I had with Dr. Charlie Garner, one of our past guests. I don't know if you know him. You both highlighted electric vehicles, and he pointed out that transforming vehicles isn't well just enough. Cars themselves pose problems for biodiversity, health, and pollution. So we must consider changing the overall system, not just the energy source. In your book, Thriving, you mentioned six keys: complexity, circularity, creativity, coherence, convergence, and continuity. Can you briefly explain those? Is that an order to follow as I.
No, these are the underlying principles of life. That's why I tried to distill them. This is what allows systems, living systems, to thrive. And remember, societies are living systems, and so are economies. Um, and so, some of them are quite intuitive. So circularity, we mentioned, everything moves in cycles in natural systems. The waste for something is the food for something else. And so we have to design things in that way, the circular economy. um, if we look at complexity, this is actually acknowledging that the network effect is a positive thing in complex living systems, meaning the more relationships you have, likely the more resilient the system will be, and the more creative as well, which is one of the other principles. Innovation is always happening in natural systems, and that often comes from diversity and from overlapping of different systems. Coherence is about having an organizing principle, or an organizing design, if you like, in social systems like companies. That really means having a purpose, having a very, very clear set of strategic goals. And then in terms of convergence, this is really how change happens in living systems. What happens is you get reinforcing feedback loops, which bring us to a tipping point where change that seemed to be going very slowly suddenly goes very quickly. And so, systems can be disrupted through convergence. And we call it convergence because it's a number of forces or trends or technologies, policies that all, you know, amplify each other and hence speed up the change. And then continuity, of course, is about sustaining the system. Every system wants to live forever, wants to reproduce itself. In natural systems, it is literally reproduction, but in social systems, this is about being able to think and act for the long term, while having short term resilience to all the shocks. And there are resilience strategies you can adopt, but it's also about having that long term focus of where we're going.
Thank you. I must say that I find it difficult to pass by complexity, as in general, people are not wired to think in systems and the interconnectedness of everything. So I don't know if you have any idea how to do that.
It
Every
is
day
a
we are finding new things regarding how nature works, how trees communicate, and we are not entirely aware of what's around us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit overwhelming, I agree. And people, though, often confuse complexity with complicatedness. And complexity doesn't always have to be complicated. You can have a very networked system that has very simple design rules or relationship rules. And so, we can still find order within the complexity if we try to go to those design principles behind it. The problem, of course, is that in a way it's the sea that we're swimming in. So how do you recognize the system that you're a part of? But I think we do it practically in lots of different ways, and more. This is what AI is doing for us, isn't it? It's helping us simplify or synthesize and navigate that complexity. Certainly not perfectly, but it is allowing us to distill out some of the essence of what we're trying to find or understand about the systems that we're part of. But from a practical point of view, it's just about encouraging people in whatever sphere of influence they have as many um, sensible relationships as they can, to get into partnerships, collaborations, coalitions, because this is really how systems function in a healthy way.
True. And you mentioned technology. I feel like we are so disconnected from nature. We have been alienated, I would say. And I think also that is a consequence of technology. Despite technology having a positive outcome regarding improving our systems and helping us to easily adapt to what we are facing, the challenges we are facing right now. So, what is your view on that, on AI, and how technology in general can help us?
Yeah. Well, technology, I think we should always think of as neutral. I mean, technology is usually a tool, so it's how we use it, right? We can use nuclear energy to power a city or to blow up a city. So, and that doesn't happen automatically or by accident. Uh, every technology we have to be very conscious about, and we have to look at the impact that it's having. And some of the impacts may be positive and some may be negative, and we need to work on reducing the negative and increasing the positive. That's true for every technology that we've ever invented. And so, and I mean that very, very, very literally. I can't think of a technology where that's not true. Even if you think, some people say fire is the original technology. Well, think about that. All the positive things we've been able to do with fire, heat, warmth, cooking, etc. And then fire is also devastating communities. Um, so that's uh, part of the answer. I always like this formula called Ehrlich's formula. He was a popular writer in the 1960s, and he came up with a formula called the impact formula, where he said impact, by which he meant environmental impact, is equal to technology times population times affluence. Now, if you just look at the other two factors, they're pretty obvious, right? The more people there are, the higher the impact, and the more affluent they are, the more they're consuming, the higher the impact. But technology was seen as a bit controversial. Like, does technology reduce, automatically increase our environmental impact? Unfortunately, for the most part, that has been true since the Industrial Revolution, especially. We've increased our own power to make an impact, to do things more efficiently, and therefore we dig things up faster. We plant things in monocultures over thousands of square kilometers and wipe out biodiversity. We overfish the oceans and so on. So it has been true, but it doesn't have to be true, because of course technologies can also help us solve many of the social and environmental problems. Um, so you mentioned AI specifically. This is one, again, we have to really, really track very carefully, but it's an area I'm quite focused on, and every day I'm seeing new applications for it. Whether it's the fact that AI can diagnose much, much more accurately all kinds of diseases like cancer from scans and so on. So early detection becomes easier. Drug development, by which I mean, pharmaceutical drugs, we can speed that up so we can get to those solutions quicker. And then on the environmental side, it's being used to, help us with precision agriculture, for example, by using AI, and working uh, with companies like Blue Technology, working with John Deere. They can reduce the amount of chemicals on a field by more than 90%, because they're using AI to analyze the field as they're going across it, and to say this is precisely how much fertilizer or herbicide, pesticide or fungicide is needed for this individual plant as we're going over it. So I could give many, many examples, but there is an upside, and I think the upside has the potential to you know be bigger than the downside. The short term downside, of course, is the energy footprint. But even there, we see the efficiencies now start to kick in. China's DeepSeek was way, way more energy efficient than ChatGPT. So once innovation kicks in, I think we will really reduce that environmental footprint. We need to watch it, but I think the upside is very strong.
That's interesting. And I was thinking about how it can help us thrive. Well, I mean, everyone thriving to promote just transition, which is, I think, one of the most difficult things we have right now. How can we ensure everyone is on board? How can we ensure everyone has the same access to basic needs and the opportunities to thrive?
Yeah, again, not something that necessarily happens automatically, right? If we talk about technology in the context of food, the reason why, people didn't all starve in the second half of the 20th century was because of technology, the Green Revolution. And there was great fear. I mentioned Paul Ehrlich. He wrote a book called The Population Bomb, where he was basically predicting that the world would starve. So technology, can definitely have those impacts for the masses. In this case, uh, in a place like India, I mean, it literally probably saved hundreds of millions of lives. Um, but it doesn't happen automatically. Today we have enough food to feed the world, but the world isn't all fed. And if we look at the most recent experience with COVID-19, once the pandemic had more or less run its course, there was still about a third of developing countries which had never got a single vaccine, whereas I think I had four. So you have to actually design the system to be just and to be fair, and to tackle what we sometimes call the digital divide, which is that you know everybody doesn't have equal access to technology. Not only internet and phones and so on, we're still a few billion people don't have access, but all kinds of technology, including the latest now, AI. Now, I think when innovation is at its best, it breaks through those barriers commercially. It just makes the technology so good and so cheap that it's accessible to everyone. And you could say, probably for the internet and for mobile phones, we've got a long way there simply by it being so accessible. Um, but we need to design it that way, and we need to make sure that it's not all hoarded by corporate elites for their own profitability, which tends to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, great point. And I was about to ask you, what role should companies play in driving sustainable transformation? And what kind of leadership do we need so we can withstand the pressures of the short term?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we have to always be vigilant with companies because they do, as much as we've tried to change them, they do have this overriding profit motive. Um, there's been some recognition that the purpose of business is not to make profits, it's more of to deliver value to a broad set of stakeholders. But in practice, most companies are still very much driven to focus on those economic returns. Um, so I think business left to itself doesn't necessarily show the kind of leadership that we need. You always get the exceptions. You get the pioneers who show what's possible. In the 2010s, it was Unilever. Now perhaps it's Patagonia and others. They show it's actually possible to have a mission that is about making the world a better place and to be profitable and to grow and um, be a successful company at the same time. But unless those ideas and aspirations are embedded into legislation, I believe, and unless civil society organizes and keeps up the pressure on both business and government, I think we still have a problem with the system itself being rather unsustainable. And remember that business and government often get into bed together. We see more and more, corporate lobbying, and that's in some ways why we're taking a few steps back right
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Well, what was once hidden is now in plain sight.
Yeah, they're
We
not
can
even
see it.
pretending anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And we have seen it recently. Well, this had been a really lovely conversation, really interesting one. And I would love to continue this perhaps on a second round. But before we end uh, our episode, do you have any final message you would like to leave with our listeners? Perhaps practical steps, what they can do to contribute to the change and thrive?
Yeah, I mean, there are practical things, of course, around, what is it that we choose in terms of where we work? What is it that we choose in terms of what we buy? That your choice of diet can have a huge impact on your footprint if you go more plant based, for example. What's your energy source? Is it 100% renewable energy? All of these things can help. Who do you vote for? Um, Ultimately, it's about people in their sphere of interest and influence just doing what they can, because that all adds up through the system, and the system therefore changes. But I think the bigger point I want to make is about hope. I think we live in times that are very difficult. A lot of changes going on, many not to our liking, not necessarily seeming to move in the direction of thriving. Um, but hope is an interesting thing. Rebecca Solnit, who writes on this, says hope is not like a lottery ticket you sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. It is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. And we're in an emergency. So, hope comes actually from taking action and then connecting with all the others who are taking action, because then we believe and we can see the change is possible. That's why I wrote Thriving, was just to collect hundreds of examples of where, especially innovation and technology, is making the change not only possible, but is making it happen, and at speed and at scale. So we need to tune into those things more, rather than all the doom scrolling that we do on our social media feeds, right? Just to balance it up a little bit. But to end, I always do this cheeky thing, with your permission, of course, which is to end with a poem.
Okay, let's do it.
But I always sort of give a little bit of choice to the host. So I want to give you a choice of three poems, and you get to pick just based on the title. So the one is called A Place to Thrive. The other one is called Change the World. And the third one is called It's Not Never Too Late. So which would you prefer?
I will pick It's Never Too Late.
I was hoping you might, because I've never shared that publicly. So let me do this one for you, and let's see what you and your listeners think. It's never too dark to light with a spark, the blackness of night as colours flash bright, to flame in the gloom and leave a good mark. There's always a gleam of hope left in sight. It's never too dark, not ever too dark. It's never too bold to break from the mold of habits and rules, of nations and schools, to rewrite the plots of tales we've been told. There's always a magus dressed as a fool. It's never too bold, not ever too bold. It's never too soon to shoot for the moon with visions and schemes, with rockets and dreams, to wish on a star, go bust and then boom. There's always a chance to catch the sunbeams. It's never too soon, not ever too soon. It's never too high to reach for the sky with ladders to climb one step at a time, to strive without rest, to fail and retry. There's always a rhythm, always a rhyme. It's never too high, not ever too high. It's never too late to regenerate our land and our seas, the fish and the trees, to rewild the earth and change the world's fate. There's always new life buzzing like bees. It's never too late, not ever too late.
Oh, great. What a great way to end this episode. It's never too high to reach for the sky,
Yeah, never too high to reach for the sky.
never too late to regenerate. Yeah,
Never too late to regenerate. Yep.
it's a great message. And for our listeners, just think about the small steps you are taking. They are contributing to the larger change, to the bigger movement. So thank you. I love it.
Good.
Thank you once again for your time, for sharing your time with us. And I hope to welcome you in a future episode so we can continue this lovely conversation.
It was my pleasure.